And God is working and has been working in my life to help me overcome struggles with guilt, shame, unforgiveness, control, and anger. Growing up, I did not have a true relationship with God. I did go to a Catholic church, and I was baptized as an infant. I went to catechism as a young child, and then I attended Mass, mostly on important holidays, but never really on a regular basis. At 14 years old, my mother and father divorced, and I blamed myself for years for their marriage ending. I witnessed a lot of verbal and mental abuse between my mother and father. My mom had left multiple times, but I would get upset that they weren't together, so my mom would just always go back. And one day, my father and my mother got into a really bad altercation in front of me. So I was very scared, and I couldn't go out the front door, so I ran out the back door and jumped off my 6-foot deck, and I ran to a friend's house. My friend's mother and older sister called the police, and my dad left that day in the back of a cop car. My dad held a grudge on me for getting him arrested for years, even into adulthood. After their divorce, I had a very strained relationship with my father. We wouldn't talk for months, and then at the age of 24 years old, before my first son was born, I cut off all communication with him because of his anger towards me. I married right out of college and moved to Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, after getting my bachelor's degree in nursing. I then gave birth to my 2 boys, Chase and Weston. My then husband did not want my father involved in my kids' lives either. Throughout my marriage, I experienced many feelings of not being good enough. We actually began counseling prior to even getting married, and numerous times throughout our marriage. I often felt very alone as I took care of my boys, while my then husband worked several hours outside of the home. When he would come home, there would be a lot of arguments that the house wasn't clean, even though I just cleaned it, and that nothing was done. I would get corrected if I made the bed wrong and the corners weren't tight enough against the mattress, if the vacuum didn't put lines correctly in the carpet, and even if the countertop wasn't cleared off good enough. I started to resent my then husband because no matter how hard I tried, it was just never good enough. I ended up starting health and fitness business in 2012 after having my second son, and I finally found a community of women that I enjoyed connecting with regularly. It brought me so much joy to be able to serve others, and I actually felt like I made a difference, and I was often commended for my work that I put in with the words of affirmation that I never got at home. In 2014, my marriage was falling apart, and I filed for divorce after having an emotional long-distance affair on my husband for about 2 months. I ended up confessing my sins to my husband because I had so much shame and guilt. I still resented him and felt that I was at my lowest point in my life, although I had really no idea what was about to come. So I decided to check out a local church that someone I knew went to. My husband refused to go since we irregularly went to a Catholic church and this was not the same denomination, but I did still take my boys. The moment I walked in, I felt peace, I felt at home, and the true presence of Jesus that I never felt before. The worship songs drew me in even more, and I sobbed to the songs that the worship team sang, Give Me Faith by Elevation Worship and Broken Vessels by Hillsong United, which Brent just played as the second song. I never heard of those songs until those first services, but they were 2 songs that will always be close to me because of the words. They were just so clear and relatable to my situation. Going to church and working on my relationship with the Lord led me to dropping the paperwork for the divorce and working on my marriage and putting more effort in. For the first time, I was going to church regularly, was building friendships within my church community, and I got baptized June 7th of 2015. Although my relationship with Jesus was growing, there were still many marital struggles, more counseling, and another year of fighting for my marriage. But in January of 2016, my marriage ended. When my marriage ended, I felt like God was calling me to reconnect with my father, and he met my boys for the first time when they were 3 and 4 years old. There was still a lot of tension between my father and me, but I did see the joy that he had as he was able to start rebuilding that relationship with my boys. About 4 months later, an incident changed my life. It was May 14th, 2016, and I was at a grocery store picking up a movie to enjoy with a friend. In the blink of an eye, I became the offender of a pedestrian accident. I was simply looking at the wrong place at the wrong time, and my life was forever changed. As I was pulling out into the main drag of a parking lot, I struck a woman in the crosswalk. She passed away just 3 days later. The shame and the guilt and the inability to forgive myself had me not wanting to wake up most days. I would have flashbacks of the entire accident multiple times a day, and I still do. I would see the victim even though she wasn't really there. At stores and even in my own house. I would force myself to go back to the parking lot, and I would just sit there on the opposite side because I couldn't possibly go to that space. And I would just sit there and scream and sob and pound on the steering wheel, asking God why he allowed this to happen. Why did I have to be there at that time? I was supposed to go to the other red box for the movie, but I just missed the turn, so I just decided to keep going up to the next one. Why did she have to be right there in my blind spot? Why couldn't I have just waited seconds until she wasn't there? I was so angry with myself that I just couldn't forgive myself. Almost a year later, my trial ended in me having 5 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and thousands of dollars in fines. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." For days, months, and years, I felt like I could never see anything good that has come out of something so bad that I took someone's life. Just a few months after my accident, I met my now husband, Brent. God brought him to me exactly when he knew I needed him. Through my struggles, Brent has comforted me. More importantly, he is a huge part of me growing in my relationship with Jesus. I knew Jesus was working through him just to get to me. But with this new relationship and marriage, because we did just marry 6 months after meeting, came a lot of baggage with a blended family. In 2016, after getting married, we started going through court to fight to have any time with my stepkids. Our time was taken away, and we had to work harder than ever to maintain any physical contact and even any type of communication that was trying to be removed from us. Over the past 5 years, I started attending Celebrate Recovery. I needed healing from the shame, guilt, unforgiveness, and anger that I carried. I felt like I was holding myself hostage, and I was trying to control every situation that came my way. When I heard about Celebrate Recovery, I knew that it was for those who were hurting and needed Jesus. I was that person. I was in so much pain mentally, and my desire to grow closer to Jesus was getting stronger and stronger. During Celebrate Recovery, my husband kept talking to me about working through the 12 steps. He was so confident that if I would go through this program, I would find healing that I needed, and my relationship with the Lord would be even stronger. So I signed up and I started working through it. As I worked through these steps, I realized that not only did I carry the hurt and weight of my accident, but I also was holding on to anger and resentment with my past, with my father, with my ex-husband, and even with my husband's ex as we struggled through the blended family issues. I also realized I struggled with codependency. Step 2 says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Philippians 2:13. This step hit me hard. I was trying to work through this healing ultimately on my own. I would give it to God, and then I would take it right back. I wasn't truly letting go and letting God work my situation out. I also realized that every time I attempted to take control, I was telling God that he wasn't good enough and that I didn't trust him. As I worked through my steps, I was also able to surrender my accident, my relationship with my father, and the struggles with our blended family, and I lay them at the feet of Jesus. Let's go back to that verse I shared earlier, Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. From 2014, when I first started attending church, to March 1st of 2016, when I had my trial and was given my sentencing, I have said I wanted to serve my community and volunteer, especially at church. I never once followed through. It wasn't until I received my sentencing of 300 hours of community service that I was finally forced to taking those steps, because I just wouldn't do it on my own. I felt like God was saying, okay, Deidra, you keep saying that you want to serve me, but you're not doing it on your own, so I'm going to help you. And it was the best thing that could ever happen. Through my community service, I have met incredible people, built new relationships and close friendships, and the feeling of serving brings me so much joy in my heart. God truly turned a horrible situation into good. He has helped me grow, learn, and heal. Also, March 1st, which is next week, marks my final completion of my 5 years of probation. As I became willing to surrender my relationship with my father, I was able to use step 9 and apply it. We may direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Matthew 5:23-24. Although my father made his mistakes, I also realized I was not perfect either, and have hurt him because I was also hurting. On Father's Day of 2019, my husband Brent was encouraging me to let go and actually take the steps to apologize for my grudges against my dad. I went into this not expecting anything back. I needed this for my own healing. That day, I called and we had one of the best conversations where I was able to ask for forgiveness for how he felt hurt through what I have said and done. I could not have done this on my own. It was truly through the help and the strength of Jesus and my husband's encouragement that mending of the relationship happened. This was a huge turning point that allowed healing on both ends for my father and me. I have also been working to surrender the need to be in control the last 4.5 years of court and fighting for a relationship and contact with my stepchildren. Letting go and letting God in the midst of the custody battles has allowed God to move and work for us. Since our custody trial last year, God has showed up and worked miracles that I never thought could happen. We now have one of my stepkids living full-time with us, and we also have a stronger relationship with my other 2 stepkids, and their mindset of being here with us has significantly changed in a positive way. One other area of control that God has been working with me on is with finances. I grew up not having a lot of money, and my mom worked really long and hard hours to provide for me, especially after the divorce. I was determined to not struggle with finances and not ever to let my kids feel like they couldn't have anything nice. So I worked hard and I saved and I budgeted. When I started going to Grand Point, I would give a little bit here and a little bit there, but I didn't give a specific amount. As I began reading the Bible more, and after I married Brent, I began to learn about the biblical principle and discipline of tithing, or giving 10% of my income to the church. I felt like I gave a lot already, but I didn't realize that there was an actual percentage that I was supposed to give. In January of 2018, we began the Financial Peace University class that was offered here at church. Brent and I sat down and we began working on our budget. As I wrote everything out, I had some fear creeping in me, and I was thinking, we don't have much money left over. When Brent looked at the budget, he asked, what about tithing? About a month later, I was paying the bills, and I listed everything to Brent about what I paid. He said, "Did you mention tithing?" I cringed when he said that because I honestly felt like we couldn't tithe on that paycheck to pay our bills. So I said, "We don't have any money left over to tithe." He replied, "Giving back to God should never be based on what we have left over. It should be the first thing that we do out of our paycheck. That's why it's called the first fruits." Out of my anger and frustration, I spouted off, "God's not going to come down and pay our bills." My husband looked at me and replied, "He's not. He's the one that has provided you with the job to pay the bills. But it's your job and your money, and I'm not going to force you to do anything," he said. "This is between you and God." That day, I did give all of our tithing, and I hate to admit it, but I did it somewhat begrudgingly. I told my husband that I did, and his response was, "I'm so proud of you. Now watch how God blesses your faith." About a month later, I was meeting my accountant since it was tax season, and one of the reasons why I said I couldn't tithe anymore because I knew I had to save. He told me that I had actually overpaid on my quarterly taxes, and I was shocked. I have always had to pay an extra when I submitted my taxes at the end of the year. When I told my husband the amount that was overpaid, he smiled and pointed out the amount that I was getting was 10 times the amount of the tithe that day was in our conversation. God had multiplied my giving and gave it back to me. I have never missed tithing ever since that day. Mark 5:34 says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." God wants us healed. God is waiting for us to take the steps and let go of our hurts, habits, and hang-ups, and to surrender them to Him so His purpose for us can be fulfilled. Although I am not completely cured and healed and still go through struggles, these 12 steps have healed me, have helped me find so much healing and freedom through Jesus. I can do anything through Christ who strengthens me. Thank you for letting me share.